Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Seraphin Show. You are listening to us on Thursday. It is September the 14th. It is about 9:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 here in Texas, America, and we should be rolling to you live on Rumble. If you're sitting in the live chat right now, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Looks like we are having a little bit of a Rumble connection difficulty, so give us 1 second here. We are going to troubleshoot the stream and make sure that it goes through. Ryan, I'm seeing sending data on Rumble only, so it is not quite streaming it yet. Doesn't look like we're live. Give me just a second here, folks. If you're watching us on any of the other channels, I would always encourage you to go to rumble.com/KyleSeraphin/live. That will give you the newest version of whatever show we have just run, or it will give us the live show that is running right now. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to stop the stream. We're going to reboot it up real quick and make sure it will run. Rumble's where our audience is. So stand by for that. Ryan, if you want to shut it down real quick, let's reboot this thing and make it happen.
Three, two, one.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. We are fighting with Rumble right now, who has changed our stream key a few times. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm bringing on one of the epic tellers of truth, my friend Mike Benz, also known as at Mike Benz Cyber. So by all means, if you're not following Mike on Twitter or any of the other local platforms, we'll get all of his handles on here. Make sure you do. Folks, this is Thursday, September the 14th. We're going to run right into this live. I'll read some ads in just a second here, Mike. But let's just say hey to you. Where are you right now? Where are you in the world? Can you hear me?
Sorry, just say I just had a call come through. Sorry. Say again.
I said, where in the world? Where in the world are you right now?
I'm currently in Miami. I just finished this cross country road trip, and I think this is probably going to be Fort Florida through 2024. It's a pretty wild year ahead, and seeing how they're rolling up and indicting prominent figures who are conservative for jaywalking in New York and California and Delaware and Michigan, I kind of wanted to be somewhere where I thought I'd have a halfway decent shot if they come for me. And Miami-Dade actually did just red, so for what it's worth.
That is true. Yeah, historically very blue though, I think.
Yes, true.
So you had a pretty awesome road trip from what I saw. You were posting videos from the road. I actually like your Twitter feed more than almost anybody's. It's got a mixture of some fun sort of just Mike being Mike, hiking, walking, and then like sometimes Mike in nature just ranting about how we're all screwed in the world, which is kind of fun, and some piano playing. I didn't know you played piano the way that you do, but it's pretty fantastic.
I'm glad you appreciate the eclectica. I like to think that I come across as most harmless to the people who would have it out for me because, it's a little weird.
Well, I'm going to play a quick clip from there because I went through and scoured your feed for fun things that I liked, and I'm going to show it to my audience because I want them to get a sense of who you are. We'll do a bullet point bio because you came on my show in person, you sat in my house and gave people a really good taste of who you are as a human being. And drank some of my coffee, which was great. Let's do video number 2 real quick, Ryan, and then I'll let Mike say what this is. upside down. Flexing.
Kyle, I was not ready for this one.
Okay. What do you think, Mike? Were you ready for that?
Well, you know, it's the Conan Barbarian quote, right? Like, you always have to maintain the discipline of the steel or whatever. And no, well, yeah, that's a deep cut there, Kyle. That's
How far back does that go?
that's a quite some time ago. But yeah, California is a wonderful place. We will reconquer it one day. It's so beautiful and corrupt. You know, I sort of liken it to, you know, an ex-girlfriend or like a fickle mistress that you had a beautiful time together, and you may never fully get over, but it was a time in life and you weren't right for each other.
That's true. And then she became fully crazy, and she burned all your things in the front yard. And she said if you ever come back, that she would kind of cut off your genitals and burn them and give them to another child or something. If you guys are watching on the Rumble channel, you just saw Mike doing a bunch of pull-ups in Santa Monica on the sort of outdoor fitness equipment. If you were listening, what you missed was Mike Benz doing a 2-arm climb on 2 ropes that are parallel to each other, and then getting up to the top, which is probably, 20 feet, 25 feet up in the air, and then knocking out like a pretty long set of pull-ups throughout that audio you were hearing. It was mostly Mike doing pull-ups on a bar that is pretty thick, that is holding up those ropes, and then he decides to come down and do an invert and hang upside down and do a body flex. And he's basically showing off for other dudes, because there's no chicks watching you do that thing. That is a dude-only moment. Guys appreciating guys on the beach, which, you know, there's something very California about that too.
Yeah, I did it for you, Kyle. I knew this moment would happen.
It actually tickled me in a big way.
Your amazing podcast.
I want to know who was filming it.
Too, by the way.
What's that?
Yeah. I'd like to see the Kyle decathlon. Actually, I bet there's some special set of skills that you've carved
at
out
some point. We'll show the videos that we have. Some of there's a little video of me going through PJ Indoc, and doing some wild stuff and getting drowned and stuff like that. So maybe we'll play that on the show at some point in time. It's out there. It goes back to 2011. I want to say I went through PJ in 2011, so I went through the Indoc there. All right,
nice.
let's kind of talk about it. I want to play another clip. This is what we really came in to talk about, and this is a little chunk of what we're going to get into. But I wanted you had the best way of describing the CIA. It's video number 6, Ryan, as you get in there. This is what you teased out on your tweet this morning. This is the animal that we're going to be discussing, so people have an understanding. And sometimes when you're in the moment and you're riffing, you just have it. And this is one of those moments when you just had it. So we're going to play Mike video number 6, and then let's talk CIA.
And like, okay, you can argue there's a place for that because it's a mean old world out there, and we need to, a good offense is the best defense.
Sure.
But that's like having, a rabid pit bull, Rottweiler, orca whale dragon, to defend your house in the, this junkyard dog. It's got to stay outside.
Right.
That thing can't come in.
It can't come in the backyard where we're having a barbecue either.
Right.
But there's a hole in the fence.
But now you've got CIA officers who are the heads of the trust and safety teams at
Yes.
both Google and Facebook.
Mike, do you know how I know that we're kindred spirits?
Yeah, that.
Because you gave that analogy and it didn't even rattle me. I was like, yeah, I'm following you 100%. Like,
Right.
That's how I would talk about it.
I mean, that is like the shape. I don't know what inspired that particular constellation of terms, but I think the reason that afterwards, when I listened to the audio, I was like, yeah, that actually is exactly what it is because it sort of captures all mediums and modalities of like twisted gargoyle animals who will defend you from land, sea, and air, but you never want inside the house. Like the issue right now is when we'll talk about it, but the Central Intelligence Agency and our foreign-facing Department of Dirty Tricks organizations are supposed to protect us from the bad out there because one very particular set of skills, which is lying and sabotage, which is especially why you don't want to invite them to your dinner table, that they lie and sabotage at your dinner.
Yeah, I don't want them at my dinner table, at least not domestically. If we're overseas, that might be a good person to have watching your back, it turns out.
Right. No, it's like the movie MacGruber, where he's got this one move where he just neck twists everyone. And, because that's all he knows how to do, he starts neck twisting the good guys. And that's basically what we have. I mean, if I understand the compromise position that you scat CIA into 1,000 pieces to the winds or whatever the JFK quote is. I understand that there's schools of thought, even for people who want accountability for the CIA, that you still don't get rid of the thing. Not that that's even politically possible, but that you reform. Okay, I can sort of compromise with that, but they can't. You got to have. The NCAA has these rules around not being able to rotate, from jobs, into others. You can't have people whose professional training is psychological operations and government overthrow involved in the election, like domestic elections, because they're just going to use that skill set to overthrow governments here, as you can make the argument may or may not have happened quite recently.
I think you could make that argument. Okay, so before we get too far in there, because we do get new listeners all the time, you're Mike Benz, you run the Foundation for Freedom Online, and tell people maybe like the 5 bullet points of your background so they can kind of do it. And then I'll refer them to go back and watch our previous so they can hear about you being a master chess player and a pianist and pull-up artist.
Sure. So I'm Mike Benz. I'm the executive director of Foundation for Freedom Online. Our goal is to restore the golden age of the internet and take on the censorship industry. Before that, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Economic Bureau at the Department of State.
We just get a freeze up.
Yes, sir. Should be back in a second here.
All right, folks, bear with us. Our connection's on there. Mike's on the road, and I'll take him wherever we can find him. So he's going to have to probably reboot through there. As he's saying, he was a political appointee in the Trump administration in the State Department. That is not a low-level position. This is not somebody who was on the GS pay scale. This is a guy who was tapped on the shoulder and asked to come in and do this. I don't think we think that anything nefarious is happening, but Mike is on the road, and as he said, he's flying around and seeing things in Florida, and he might be staying in Florida for a little while. So I'm going to ask him to exit our stream and come back in.
He worked directly under Mike Pompeo at the State Department, correct, Kyle?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, he was at Mike Pompeo's State Department, directly under it as the deputy. I think he said deputy assistant secretary. It's a couple steps below, but he's going to rejoin our thing right now. So,
and
Mike is more conspiratorial than I am on this one. He just said he suddenly dropped the connection out of nowhere, which is a little bit strange. In any case, we've seen the live chat saying we vote for nefarious. That is correct. I'm gonna play a quick little clip if we can, because I want to get Mike's take on it in a second here. But let's do video number 1. And this is essentially stuff that we're talking about. This is the kind of operations that we are concerned about. This is what happens when you put people that are cutouts either for the CIA or cutouts for the NSA or people that are working in the intelligence community, and they are doing they're trying to police your thoughts, folks. This is the thing we keep talking about. There's an organization known as CISA, which is it is the infrastructure policing organization created under Trump in 2018. It's the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. Yes, they did use the word security in it twice, which is a weird thing to do. But you've got an organization that has literally said, okay, infrastructure is our mandate. This is what we do. And things like the internet are in the infrastructure, and things like, the electrical power grid and the nuclear systems and things like that. All these little sort of webs of government connectivity are infrastructure, and they're interested in cybersecurity. But the thing that they decided to rope into all of this, and I think Tracy Beans was instrumental in sharing this, at least to my knowledge, they said, we want to deal with what's called cognitive infrastructure. Now, the word cognitive, of course, referring to your thoughts and your mind. And the cognitive infrastructure is when they say, we want to police how you think. We are going to loop your brain into our mandate. And the only way they can do that is through censorship and through mandate, sort of handling the things that come in through your ears. If they're trying to police what is in your gray matter and secure it, then they are actually worrying about whether or not they can get in and decide how you see things and what you see things. Mike, we're going to stabilize this connection. I'm going to play video number 1, if you would. This just came off your timeline. You're going to have a great way to talk about this as well. Great. So let's do video number 1, Ryan.
So our current measures often revolve around debunking and fact-checking. We're trying to undo the damage when it's already done. And we know from lots of research in cognitive science that it's very difficult to correct information once people have already been exposed to a falsehood. And this is what we call the continued influence of misinformation. Once you're exposed to a falsehood, it settles in your memory. It makes friends with other things that you know to be true, and people tend to retrieve false info from their memory even when they acknowledge a correction. And so pre-bunking, trying to preemptively protect people before that damage occurs, is much more effective than debunking. So what the media described as a psychological vaccine against fake news is really based on the psychological theory of inoculation. So just as injecting yourself with a weakened dose of a virus triggers the production of antibodies to help protect you from future infection, you can do the same with information. By preemptively injecting people with a severely weakened dose of fake news, or with an example of the techniques that are used to manipulate people, people can build up cognitive antibodies or intellectual antibodies against misinformation.
So that came out of your line. You want to talk about who that is and what they're talking about with this idea of pre-bunking?
Yeah, so this is they call themselves researchers, government cutouts, and I'll get to how that is, but this is an individual named Sander van der Linden, who is one of the most prolific digital MK Ultra mad scientists in the censorship game. And what I mean by that is, it's well acknowledged that from the 1950s to the 1970s, up until the Church Committee basically destroyed it, there was a project in this country called MK Ultra, which was a program that was funded and designed by the national security state, by the CIA, primarily it was run by the CIA, but also with a leg up from the Defense Department and the State Department. And the goal was to be able to figure out the psychology of the mind in order to be able to manipulate people into behaviors and political activity that was in U.S. national interest, creating Manchurian candidates, mass persuasion of foreign populations. Of course, like all things national security state, the sort of twisted, dirty tricks department turned inward, and they started doing trauma testing and LSD testing on U.S. individuals. And the whole thing became a sort of crooked cabal of national security state agencies and university centers, like Stanford University, Harvard University, Oklahoma University, and about 60 others, who all got money to do these attitude and psychological modification experiments for purely political purposes. The exact same thing is happening now, and it started right after the 2016 election in the digital sphere, which is why I call it digital MK Ultra, because you have the CIA, DARPA, Defense Department, State Department, spook world sponsors who are all providing tens of millions of dollars funding to approximately 60 universities, the same universities involved in MK Ultra, for the purpose of redesigning social media to stop people from supporting populist politicians like Donald Trump in the US, like Nigel Farage and the Brexit people in the UK, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, like the Salvini crew in Italy, like Marine Le Pen in France, like Orban in Hungary. They're rolling this out in 85 countries. Just the State Department has desks that an individual will run and sort of manage the sort of political affairs with U.S. Embassy in that region. They're going region by region, tilting every election on the internet by burying populist candidates and super saturating and using redirect methods and friction methods and intervention methods. They have a whole toolkit, this mad scientist toolkit for rigging the internet to politically favor the State Department regime establishment candidate. And Sander is like the perfect example of this, because he's basically a figure straight out of a British intelligence novel, if you will. First of all, just like Russiagate was laundered through British intelligence, Christopher Steele and Orbis Business Intelligence and the whole MI6 Richard Dearlove cabal there, that's what the CIA picked to launder that intelligence. It was British intelligence. That's that special relationship between the US and the UK. The State Department does the same thing for this MK Ultra project. They run this through primarily through British labs. University of Cambridge, University of Oxford, the Oxford Internet Institute, University of Sheffield. There's a dozen of these. Now, Sander van der Linden is like one of these highly acclaimed, extremely prolific. He wakes up in the morning, it seems, just thinks about what's an interesting novel technique I can use to censor the internet today. His lab is partnered. It's called the Social Decision Making Lab, and it's partnered with the U.S. State Department, with CISA, which is the censorship agency within DHS, with the British government, and with the CIA brand Google called Google Jigsaw. Google Jigsaw was created by Jared Cohen, who was one of the youngest kids ever on Office of Policy Coordination, which is how the State Department coordinates covert action and government overthrow, the Central Intelligence Agency. He specialized in digital counterinsurgency and youth movements, that is, rallying youths in the Arab Spring to topple their government. He was actually credited with the doctrine that resulted in the Arab Spring. This is Jared Cohen, the creator of Jigsaw. So he goes from this CIA covert action job to creating Google Jigsaw. And Google Jigsaw is now at the forefront of what you just saw there, which is Sander van der Linden's research into cognitive vaccination, which is also being rolled out in U.S. schools through what's known as a digital literacy or media literacy program. By that, you think they mean, they're like teaching inner city school kids how to read. What they actually mean is if you read Breitbart or Gateway Pundit, you're media illiterate and need to be reprogrammed and redirected on the internet to read mainstream slop like the New York Times and the Washington Post.
Yeah, terrible stuff. And also, people were mentioning in the chat, MK Ultra has a pretty dark history going back. People like Ted Kaczynski were involved in it. So there's casualties that were along the line. There were plenty of people that were involved in it that were overdosed on LSD. And, there were a couple of them that committed suicide, some of them on very, very nefarious circumstances. Like the history of people going down the rabbit hole. Yeah. The minute you start,
Jolly West killed an elephant with LSD during that project.
Right, literally the amount of LSD to kill an elephant was determined. Right, they literally killed an elephant.
Yeah, they literally killed an elephant.
How much LSD did he have to take to kill an elephant?
That's a great question, but they're killing an elephant right now with what these guys are doing to the Republican Party.
Oh, see, this is why Mike is so sharp. He just made that connection in one quick step. Mike, what we may do is we may have you call in because there's just a little bit of a breakup in the audio, and I think that's the message you have to say is so much more important. Although I love seeing your smiling face in the morning, and I enjoy the reaction to it. We're gonna play a quick clip, I think, that's gonna let people see one of these NSA type spy ops and or psyop type things. This is that gal from that's doing the Ukraine thing. What's her called? STD or something like that. I don't know what the STD stands for. You know what I'm talking about? The girl with the bikini?
Oh, yeah, Lujan. Yeah,
Lujan. So we're going to play her video real quick, and then I'm going to have you call me. I'm going to send you the number real quick. Yeah, we'll drop out. We'll call you on that. So go ahead and queue up, if you would, video number 4, I believe, Ryan. Let's go play video number 4. Let's get a better connection to Mike, and we'll carry on with this.
Kyle, you're not just upset that I'm now sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts instead of your home.
I hope you are sponsored. I don't have a coffee sponsor. What I have is a mug from my sponsors with Catholic Vote. So we may even read our sponsors while we get you reconnected in here. Let's do this this video number 4. We'll drop you out and we'll give you a quick phone call.
My name is Luhan. I'm a 21-year-old female soft operator who's been serving with the Secret Tactical Division for 19 years now. Over the years, I've learned a lot about gear. What works, what doesn't work, and what's gonna straight up get you and your boys killed. Because each mission is different, you need your loadouts to be mission dependent. Your loadout needs to be constantly evolving and adapting to fit the operation. That being said, today I wanna take the knowledge that I've accrued while living with the STD and spread it onto you to keep you and your boys fucking downrange in the most lethal way possible. I'm gonna be running you through some of my various loadouts, showing you why they work, and letting you see the full kit in action, so you can really get a good grasp of what you need to be doing differently.
So that's fun. I don't know what kind of person is involved in that. I don't know where that came from, but I know that Mike has some sensations about it. Let's do a quick thanks to our sponsors while we get Mike back on the line here, and we're going to call him direct, folks. I hope you bear with us because it's way more interesting to hear what he has to say. Is, like I said, visual. It is what it is. People are already calling out this lovely lady for her physical form. Before we do anything wilder, let's talk about our sponsor over here. Or people that we sponsor, in fact. This is the-suspendables.com. It's our merch store. This directly supports Garrett O'Boyle and his family. This is his operation, so the-suspendables.com is going to start shipping soon. We'll say a big thanks to them. Also want to say thanks to my guys over at Patriot Coolers. You guys know and love them. We have Patriot Coolers sitting on my desk, on Ryan's desk. Use promo code Kyle, Kyle, for 10% off. KYLE. We'll give you 10% off, and that will support our show. And then you can do $50. $50 or more will get you free shipping. And lastly, big thanks over to my friends at Catholic Vote. Now we got Mike on here. Mike, one sec. I'm going to say thanks to my friends at Catholic Vote. There's the loop. Folks, if you're not getting the loop, you just go to catholicvote.org, type in your email address, you will get the loop. And let me just tell you what's coming on today. Today's loop has a pro-abortion ad showing a Catholic praying, a deeply sacrilegious move from this morning coming out of Ohio. And then one of those favorite people, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, engaged in being arrested for indecent exposure. Shocking enough. Someone who is not family-friendly was at a family-friendly beach in California and decided to get themselves arrested. So check out the loop. There's a whole bunch of other good stories in there. The Justice Department going after Catholics and so on. My favorite people here. All right, let's see if we can bring up Mike. Can you guys hear Mike? Ryan, you got him?
Hello,
yes,
hello.
Sir. There he is.
Great.
Okay, Mike. So we were just talking about Lujan. What is the story with this woman? People just got to see her. She's kind of got this like busty figure. She's out there talking about guns. God knows why. She said she's a soft SOFT operator. What is a soft operator?
Well, look, she's very mimetic. I mean, there's a lot of theories, and she leans into the mystique quite heavily. You know, this is a person who blew up on TikTok, sort of around the time when the military was going through this massive recruiting crisis, which it's still in.
Yep.
And, sort of purported to be within the PSYOPs division, would always appear sort of at an Army base, wearing Army gear, full kit headgear, the giant, basically assault rifles in tow is this little, sort of 5'1", sort of perky young presence on TikTok. Mm-hmm. And so given the sort of constellation of sort of PSYOPs and everything else that was sort of part of her content, she sort of got this reputation as, oh, well, this is how, the military is trying to recruit, young military age men at a time when they're bruising after January 6th. If you remember, there was a giant purge of all sort of red-blooded right-wing people from military recruitment, and also within the ranks, they had all these counter-extremism units where, if you had a Gadsden flag, or if you supported, any of the basic centuries-old centrist positions of young people in the military, you were destroyed basically by either the new DEI committees there, or the new counter-extremism ones. And so there are a lot of theories about this girl, but the thing that I find, and I don't know which ones are true or not. The thing that I find quite interesting about it is this role of the military on the internet and of military personnel in what goes viral. One of the subjects of fascination that I had for a long time, there's an incredible memo put out by the Special Forces. It was a prospectus that was put out about 18 months ago, which talked about the future of PSYOPs and the future of sort of digital warfare. And this is it's published by, I forget which branch of the Special Forces. I'll put this at the top of my Twitter timeline when I get a minute. But they literally proposed the following is a protocol for what their operations are going to look like in the future. There's an Army PSYOPs Corps who's driving in a West African region, and they see a sign on the highway for a new port being built by the Chinese. So what they do is they immediately call the U.S. Embassy in the region, and they coordinate with their DoD PSYOPs forces on the internet to spark a online campaign covertly to get the people of this West African nation to engage in race riots against the Chinese business owners in the region, to use that as leverage to convince the Chinese, to convince the African political leadership that they need to get rid of the Chinese port deal, because that's the only way to stop the destruction of local businesses and all the anger on the internet. So this is literally like the Army PSYOPs Corps, like in writing, planning to covertly organize race riots to manipulate the political ecology of a foreign country. I don't think you need to look into that too deeply to identify the ethical quandaries of that and the domestic blowback.
This has always been going on, though. So civil affairs is a division that operates either in tandem or underneath Army Special Operations and the Special Forces guys out there. So they are always doing that civil affairs, that PSYOP move. What is the new danger, would you say, from what has traditionally existed and then being able to do it with an online core?
Scale and social media. Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same thing. Now, look, this happened in the Arab Spring. What we're coming up on now, 12 years ago. But there is a capacity and infrastructure in place now that did not exist before when it was in the adolescent phase. We are reaching sort of we're approaching the mature phase of the military on the internet and everyday political day-to-day life, because it wasn't really until the Trump election that politics needed so much rigging in the eyes. There's always at least a little bit of rigging, but this is what I described recently as throughout the entire 20th century, there was something that researcher Peter Dale Scott called the Yankee Cowboy War, which were basically what he posited as sort of two factions within the CIA that sort of rotated, they sort of handed power back and forth to each other and had a sort of constant struggle. And with the sort of Yale wing of the CIA representing Northeast business interests, New York City, DC, City of London, finance capital, and some Chamber of Commerce, with the sort of cowboy faction, that sort of Texas and formerly California military contractor faction, being the sort of oil and energy and a little bit of Chamber of Commerce there as well. And so it wasn't until Trump came along and followed immediately by a coterie of winning populist candidates around the world that that domestic politics had to be rigged so hard. I don't think that the CIA necessarily played a dispositive role in the elections of the 1990s and the early 2000s, because you were between George W. Bush, the former CIA director, and Bill Clinton, who basically ran the Arkansas operations for the CIA's Iran-Contra. This is like there was a back and forth, but now with populism ascendant without censorship, there is now a saturation level that did not exist before.
People always talk about a uniparty, and you're just talking about two guys from two different political parties, but obviously were favorable candidates to the sort of administrative state, national security state operations. What you think it just got out of hand with them? It got ahead of them when when people started having access to the internet and they were able to get candidates in, they being the American people, I guess, that didn't fall in line with the expectations that they've had for years.
Yeah, they never saw someone like Trump coming. I think if Pat Buchanan, the internet, the World Wide Web was rolled out in 1991. Mm-hmm. Pat Buchanan really came on the scene politically in 1992 as a populist counterpoint to the sort of Texas A&M CIA folks and the Yale CIA folks. That is the George H.W. Bush and the Bill Clinton
the old
faction.
Skull and Bones guys.
Yeah. And like Bill Clinton was literally Yale Law School, Georgetown undergrad, and a Rhodes Scholar, and then goes on to, we won't even retrace all that. But the point is I think if Pat Buchanan had won the presidential election in 1992, we never would have had a free and open internet. For the first 25 years of the internet, it was an unalloyed good. It was the Defense Department itself that funded all of the internet freedom technology that created it all. Mm-hmm. Tor is a DARPA project.
Tell people what Tor is. Not everybody is up on the Onion routers, so maybe explain what it is.
Yeah, it's a dark web. It's a way to hide your IP address so that you can anonymously access and publish and sell information proxy services on the internet, which was very, very, very helpful to the CIA in the early days of the internet, because this is what allowed the scaling up of capacity building for CIA-backed dissident groups whose governments, the State Department, wanted to overthrow and install a more pliant U.S.-backed dictator. So, when we did this in, you tried doing it in Iran, China. I mean, you can go through dozens of countries, but this was the internet itself was a DARPA project. It was only handed over to the National Science Foundation and then privatized because it was sort of considered to be a neo Voice of America. So for folks who don't know, when the CIA was created under the 1947 National Security Act, one of the first things that was created was what was called Wisner's Wurlitzer. This is named after Frank Wisner, who is sort of one of the godfathers of the CIA, who bragged that he had 800 different media outlets who he could play like a Wurlitzer, like a mighty Wurlitzer, to create a international symphony of unified news.
And a Wurlitzer being like the electronic organs, isn't that's where my brain goes, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, basically the idea that global media could be orchestrated like a piano, because the CIA had proprietary media assets in basically every country in the world. Remember, they needed this as part of the war effort in World War II. This is what allowed such diplomatic alliance cohesion. Was you had all of these media and propaganda assets all rolled up in the Office of War Information. And then when the OSS turned into the CIA, they simply kept that to go from fighting fascism to fighting communism. Of course, now the target is populism.
Yeah, Cold War relic. People, if you're not familiar with Voice of America, it's run by the Broadcasting Board of Governors, a group that I've actually worked with a little bit. It is assumed to be full of spies of U.S. and other origins. There are people that are trying to infiltrate from other countries. Almost all of them are natives of another country. They're naturalized U.S. citizens or otherwise, so they have native level language skills, which is incredibly important if you want to go and move your propaganda, which is U.S.-based propaganda, into other countries. So we have ethnically Chinese people who are born in China that are speaking there, people from Taiwan and so on. But then you also have people from all the different Cold War era countries, the Eastern Bloc. But interestingly, some of them also have family ties and can be leaned on by those countries. So you're playing this like double agent Russian roulette game to know whether or not these loyalties lay on our side or the others, and if they're going to slant things and if they're going to be giving information. It is a really bizarre entity, and it is sort of a pseudo non-governmental entity too, because it gets public funding, but it's not specifically underneath a government agency, and it answers to the State Department nominally, I guess. That was the way I understood it. Maybe you could talk about Voice of America, because I think people have no idea what kind of weird stuff we put our money in.
There is no country on earth that we would, so charitably disambiguate from its intelligence services. I mean, just again, as background, Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Liberty, this whole coterie of CIA proprietary sister companies in media, they currently are run by USAGM, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which was formerly the Board of Broadcast Managers. But
when did that change?
Started pretty recently, actually.
Okay, because I was working with Broadcast
a couple years ago.
Yeah, Broadcast Board of Governors was people that I listened to, or I had to go work with in 2018, something like that. I think it'd be.
I think it was literally during the Trump era when it changed over to so-called USAGM.
Somebody got promoted,
but nothing changed. Though.
I know, but you get promoted for a name change.
Right. Yes, right. But these all started, even though they nominally are said to be independent. Yes. Government. Yeah. You get your money from the government, but you're independent from the government.
That's right.
I love that's. But that is only because they caught so much flack because they were directly created by the Central Intelligence Agency and lived that way for 40, 50 years. And then anytime there was a news headline or an atrocity in a foreign country that was sourced from VOA or Radio Free Liberty, everyone just said, wait a second, you're just the CIA. And so I said, oh, wait, okay, we're going to become independent now. But it's like, what? Think about what other country on earth we would so charitably extend that, like, oh, okay, well, they say they're independent now. They still get their money from the government.
Yeah.
They're still basically run out of the State Department, which is the overt side of CIA covert activity. They were born, their mother is the Central Intelligence Agency. But, they've grown up and become so different now. I mean, imagine if Russia, had a literal, like, KGB spawned media outlet who still gets their money from the Russian government, but because they call themselves independent now, because a new entity was set up that's housed within the Russian government, to do that. I mean, and Russia, you can't name a country on earth. Even if the Brits did this, we'd say it's a British intelligence operation. Anyway, the point is it was very useful. Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Liberty and Radio Free Asia and Voice of America and all these CIA proprietaries were incredibly useful during the Cold War at a time when the rest of the world was not creating its own proprietary media content. Remember, a lot of these mediums were brand new when these CIA proprietaries were rolled out in the 1950s. Vietnam didn't have its own vibrant infrastructure of domestic indigenous radio frequency channels to listen to the news on. It was the only game in town, that is the CIA proprietaries were able to get market dominance in a lot of third world and second world regions because they had a first mover advantage into the soft power projection game there, media wise. This was the vision of the internet when it was privatized in 1991. The U.S. controlled the internet. The U.S. had the technological, it had the infrastructure advantage. When it was exported around the world, it was basically like a neo Voice of America. And it was used as such. Google came out just 4 years after the internet was privatized. In 1995, Google started as a DARPA project, a DARPA grant given to Larry Page and Sergey Brin as part of the CIA and NSA's massive digital data systems program, whose design was to identify political birds of a feather online through basically the data accumulated from search engines, Google, so that the CIA and NSA could better create a political radar system for insurgency and insurgency movements and counterinsurgency threats abroad. This is the use of our big tech companies by the national security state to rig the political ecologies of countries around the world at the very dawn of the internet. And it was used as a means of basically toppling foreign governments in everywhere from Yugoslavia to Egypt to Tunisia. And it wasn't until 2016 came around, and technically they say 2014, but 2016 we'll say, when the maturity of social media and people having accounts that had grown over time, and because of their authenticity had become very popular, that individuals started to be able to overtake institutions in terms of soft power media influence over the populace. And once that happened, the national security state lost control because its institutional assets could not overpower popular individuals with large presences on social media.
So we're literally talking about people's will overcoming the algorithmic sort of lean towards whatever the administrative state candidates or the administrative state goals are. Amusingly to me, it's not, all these things start off as a not bad idea. Just the same reason as your orca, Rottweiler, pit bull, dragon whale has to be a thing that we have. We have to have a department of dirty tricks. And the problem is that eventually it just gets used on your own citizens. We're talking about, organizations that are responsible for westernizing much of the globe. And in that way, they've sort of pulled a lot of people out of poverty. And there's been some good things. And then, of course, it's also responsible for massive amounts of civil unrest and genocide and some other stuff that goes on. It's the evil that comes along with it. And now it's playing in our backyard is essentially the way that we're looking at it.
Yeah, no, that's That's exactly right. And the issue now is they're having to reframe what the conception of democracy altogether is, because what they're realizing is there's almost no amount of propping up of these sickly, corrupt, unpopular media stations that can overcome the voice of populist anger against the crookedness of the system. And so they're having to basically go from a more or less gentle, soft power, psychological manipulation and sort of gentle rigging into these much more hard-handed authoritarian state type techniques where you literally jail their political opponents. Like in Ukraine, first of all, that's happening here. Current president's facing like 750 years in prison. And they're calling that democracy now. This is something that would violate rule number one of what the State Department's, code book is on what makes a free and fair election. Rule number one, you don't jail the leading political opponent.
It turns out, yeah.
But, two, independence of the media from the government apparatus. The Biden administration literally penned a memo yesterday to all of the leading mainstream media organs saying, cover me favorably. Don't let the opposition paint me as a bad guy. Right. Meanwhile, the administration is fucking funding these institutions through the media literacy programs. I mean, there's so much. But the issue is like they're having to define democracy as autocracy because just doing it the old way is losing to authentic one small voice type people who are resonating with much more clarity than institutions like the New York Times.
So funnily enough, my father wrote a book that's called, it's a marketing book. It's really an idea. It's called When Did You Stop Being You? And it's in search of your personal brand. And amusingly, I think people like the Biden administration and many of these organizations that are trying to manipulate people online would benefit from reading this very short book. It's got a bunch of little exercises in it in order for people to determine, is the brand that I am projecting in public realistic? And is it something that's perceivable? Is it genuine to the person that I really am? Am I living out my brand? And what happens is these people are not living out a legitimate brand. If you're talking about democracy, but your tools are authoritarianism and totalitarianism, and you're just not going to sell it to the people because people are more savvy than they've ever been. They have more and more views and more information. And so that's why this girl with the cleavage looks like a psyop to us, because what the hell is she doing? And that's why all these different people, when they step up and they say, we're really going to just help you learn how to think correctly. We're going to sort out what's going into your brain because you're just kind of a moron. You can't be doing it. We're showing the video right now of Lujan. When you have this kind of stuff, they don't look authentic. They don't look realistic to us because we know what real is because we deal with it every single day. Those of us who are in the world know what people in the world look like. And then you get online and you're like, this is not what the world looks like. I wanted to keep talking about this, but I wanted to go actually back in time a little bit. You looked like you had a piece from Mirage Men. Have you seen the movie Mirage Men, the documentary?
You're asking me? I actually did a 40-minute video on,
that's
Mirage Men, which I'll put at the top of my time.
Yeah, because I took little clips of it. I want to show a little piece of it for folks. There's a video number 3, Ryan. If you'll clear that up, you'll be able to hear. We're going to start just a little bit of it, and then I want you to talk about what that movie is about. It's an old movie. My buddies who are FBI agents love this movie, and they hate Air Force OSI because of it. And we'll show you a little bit why. So video number 3, sorry, is that 3? Yeah, video number 3. Let's play a little bit of chunk of that, and then Mike's going to tell you about Mirage Men, which I will recommend highly.
At one point, another agency was conducting an investigation, and they set up a surveillance across the street from him. And Paul's son contacted me and said, leave my father alone. You guys are across the street, and you're bothering my father. He's getting to the point that he's being paranoid. Well, I knew it wasn't us.
He said he saw.
So you're going to see the
pause
NSA.
That if you would, Ryan. So that's Mike responding to it. Folks, if you go into his Twitter timeline, you can find all these little pieces. That's just a little taste of what's going on. But essentially, Mirage Men is the story of the Air Force OSI trying to defend not very good technology that was getting picked up by very, very smart people who live in Albuquerque. And this is why one of my loves in New Mexico. We're fighting for gun rights there right now. But a long time ago, there's a lot of weird test projects that come out of Kirtland Air Force Base where I was stationed. They've got hollow mountains, all the things that would, spawn great conspiracy theories, but there's also this sort of like weird alien history there, and Mirage Men kind of touches on that. Mike, you want to kind of give a synopsis of some of the operations that were happening there?
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind here is the Air Force is where psychological operations really started. And that's why you see so many CIA people and so many PSYOPs people come out of Air Force intelligence. And just so folks understand, the reason for this is because PSYOPs actually, before it became this high-tech military-grade MK Ultra, super sophisticated, sort of cognitive manipulation soft power exercise, it began as a very crude, rudimentary propaganda leaflet dropping task by the U.S. Air Force. That is, what we would do is, during World War II, is we would have these planes that would fly over, and as the PSYOPs Corps would basically drop pro-U.S. propaganda out of airplanes, or be planted by parachuters. And so the people who would literally put boots on the ground or fly over foreign countries because we didn't have a Voice of America to penetrate their media would literally use the Air Force assets to deploy the PSYOPs. That's why to this day, there is so much PSYOPs infrastructure that's based out of the Air Force. Just so folks understand, it's not some random coincidence there. There is a history. But with respect to Mirage Men, you have this situation. What I think is happening right now is the story of drones. So you have this OPSEC imperative for classified activity in the national security state. OPSEC means operational security. It means protecting what you're doing from being disclosed to the public. And there are techniques for OPSEC that include psychological techniques in order to throw people off the scent and mislead people so that they don't identify what you're actually doing as a classified activity. So one of these things involves new technologies being tested and developed at U.S. Air Force bases. And these are huge masses of land where there's a lot of visibility for the neighboring residential folks when there are aerial projects that the base is carrying out. Now, we are currently living through the drone wars era. All of the Air Force money right now in R&D, all the DARPA money for aerial R&D is going into unmanned aerial drone vehicles and making them sleeker, making them more maneuverable, making them smaller, making them stealthier, giving them new capacities. And every time there's a news story about a new drone from a individual who happens to live near the Air Force base and then tells a local journalist, or God forbid, records it on his iPhone, that's an OPSEC hazard to the base. From their perspective, well, now the Russians know we have those drones. Now they know we have these capacities. Now it's going to draw all this heat. It's going to blow that as, in the same way that Vault 7 of WikiLeaks blew Pocket Putin and all these other NSA hacking techniques. These sorts of sightings blow novel capacities from the U.S. Air Force. And so what they engage in is a systematic psychological mind war against the individuals who report these sightings. And Mirage Men is the story of one such target, this guy, Paul Benowitz, who was a family man and a military contractor who lived right next to Kirtland Air Force Base, who the they seek the Air Force OSI on him. The NSA moves into an apartment next door. They monitor him from across the street. They break into his home while he's out of town and replace his computer with a proprietary NSA computer that automatically decrypts messages from the NSA that the NSA has programmed to read like an alien language, speaking exclusively to this poor Paul Benowitz guy, in order to convince Paul that all of his military-grade monitoring equipment targeted at the base is actually aliens, not drones. Now, given that right now we're living through that sort of drone development steroid process right now in the U.S. military, I have very little doubt that this new push about aliens is to create the predicate to do this to all the little Paul Benowitzes all over the world we're seeing this deployed in the U.S.
It's really important that people understand what a distraction this stuff looks like. It's like, look over here, aliens. The joke is about that online. That's the funny thing. People actually sense this intuitively. They don't really know necessarily. They may not have the historical background of knowing about Paul Benowitz and knowing the story of OSI going and do that. But they were a discrediting operation. And what they would do is they would just affirm something that was false. And by doing so, it gave people this this rabbit hole to run down and get into the UFOologist. And like every, curious kid, I was fascinated by this kind of stuff. When you start learning that our own government was out there destroying these guys' minds and literally driving them nuts. I think Paul Benowitz, he's dead, I think. Is that right? I think he died penniless.
Yeah, he committed suicide after being committed to an insane asylum.
They broke this. Yeah, they broke this guy's mind. And I want to just touch a little bit too about Kirtland Air Force Base. It's 51,000 acres. It's where I was stationed in Albuquerque. It's on the southeast quadrant of the Albuquerque area. It backs up against the Sandia mountain range. The mountain range actually ends on the base, and the last 3 to 4 mountains that are there are hollow. That's publicly available information. You can actually go on Google. You can look down on the base and see that some of the mountains don't look like real mountains. They're built up. They're hollow. They're continuity of government facilities where they maintain all kinds of stores. I saw trucks driving in and out of huge doors all the time. And then every once in a while, you see one of these alien photos where they're showing like a saucer that's trying to get into like one of these doors, and they're all photoshopped and stuff like this. But the reality is there's all kinds of projects that are happening. One of the fun things, Mike, that you'll find kind of wild. I got a notice when I was on Kirtland Air Force Base that the drinking water was no longer safe, and that the arsenic levels were incredibly high. And so we were drinking like this arsenic laden, rat poison laden water, right? Standard government stuff. And then almost simultaneous to that, we found out that something like 500 million barrels of oil were missing from the continuity of government facilities, the strategic oil reserve type things. And they were like, someone has stolen. It's the biggest theft since ever in the United States government. It's been going on since the 1950s, blah, 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 blah. Then they found out that they were just like leaking storage tanks that had been leaching into the groundwater. So all the things that were coming out of the JP-8, the jet fuel that we would use for the Air Force Base, were actually just going into the groundwater. So we were just drinking JP-8, mixed in with whatever tap water was coming out because the facility wasn't able to filter. So this kind of failure, it's not only are we dealing with sophisticated operations, we're also dealing with morons that they go towards the dumbest possible solution. And oftentimes it's our own government is our own worst enemy in these things. It doesn't mean that we don't need a government. It just means we've got to be on it, which is, I know, one of the things that you guys are involved in exposing the foolishness. And then the more people are aware, the less they can be tricked by these types of operations, which I think is a good win. It also makes them work really hard, though.
Well, 2 things actually to add to what you just said. One is Mirageman actually covers a case where Kirtland Air Force Base poisoned the groundwater in, I believe, the 1970s when it was conducting all these radiation experiments in the region, which resulted in the mass death of animals. Animals being basically flayed alive by bombs and radiation testing. And then that was turned in by Air Force OSI into local rumors that aliens were actually flaying these animals rather than U.S. military bombs being dropped. But one other thing is, and if everyone listening, if you go to the top of my Twitter timeline right now, at Mike Benz Cyber, you will see exactly what Kyle just described about UFO stories as a national security state sanctioned media distraction mechanism. What I have at the top of the timeline is a post containing the 1954 CIA cable to the State Department when the CIA was working on to topple the government of Guatemala in 1954. And the Guatemalan government caught on to the CIA plot to overthrow the government and install a U.S.-backed dictator there. And so the CIA penned a cable to the State Department saying, hey, the government of Guatemala is on to us. We need to activate a news cycle in Guatemala. Here's the direct words of the memo. If possible, this is on history.state.gov. Okay, this is a State Department.gov website because this has all been declassified now because it's been 70 years. Where here it is, a telegram from Operation PD Success headquarters in Florida to the CIA stations in Guatemala. If possible, fabricate big human interest story like flying saucers to take play away. It's literally a fucking CIA, I'm sorry, a hecking CIA plot to distract from a busted government overthrow operation by getting people focused on fake alien stories instead.
Yep. It's as old as time, getting people to look over here. I always equate this to the laser pointer. I always tell people, if you feel like you're chasing ghosts in the media, if you feel like you're chasing stories and you're outraged at this and then that, at this and that, it's like a cat that's chasing a laser pointer that you're sitting up on the couch trying to keep the cat from scratching your furniture. So you shine the laser pointer all over the carpet, and the cat attacks the dot, and it's throwing its claws into the carpet instead of your upholstery. End of the day, the cat comes back. It has no laser because the laser is being originated somewhere else, and it's all misdirection, and it's all this plot to just keep the cat occupied. And these operations are trying to keep Americans' minds occupied, so they're not paying attention to the real problem, which is that there's somebody up there with the laser pointer that's doing some pretty nefarious stuff on the other end. They're just trying to keep these people distracted so they can keep doing business as usual. And
well, that used to work a lot better when there was only one laser pointer.
Right.
The issue is now people can tune into the Kyle Seraphin show and just see, a relative straight shooter who they may agree or disagree with on an issue by issue basis, but they're like, hey, this is a regular dude. This feels authentic, whether he's right or wrong. There's something really weird when you tune in. I mean, after having spent so many years now, like listening to news on the internet from regular everyday people, you can feel the inauthenticity of state-backed, Mockingbird cutouts. Like when you turn on CNN or you turn on Fox News or MSNBC or ABC or NBC, you can feel the talking points crawling through the skin of the anchors. These people, you instinctively know that if there was some dark shit in the story that they knew about, they wouldn't tell you even if they knew about it. Because they can't.
So when we used to train for human, and human is human intelligence. It's the basics of gathering information from other people, and they can do it. You can do it in a shady spook way, and you could work for an agency, or you could do it in a law enforcement way. And there's a lot of human that's involved in law enforcement, right? And so they would do this human block. And first of all, the people that taught human were the weirdest, most socially awkward people. When I was at the FBI Academy, it just made me laugh. I'm like, why do we have people who are social retards out there trying to teach how to not be a weirdo? And so you end up with a bunch of these agents, and there's actually videos. There's a guy that's called Washington's Ghost, and he just put out an interaction with the FBI agent, and it's actually not an FBI agent. He's actually a Treasury agent claiming to be an FBI agent. Even weirder, Mike. But he's with a real agent. They're in Atlanta, and they're going and they're interviewing a guy, and he's like, you ever meet somebody that just makes the hair on your back stand up and you want to just let the government know about him? We're here for you. We want to help you. And the guy's like, you're weird. Get off my porch. I don't want to talk to you. Do you have a search warrant? Go away. There's this whole idea that weirdos will go out and try and engage, and they're going to try to sell it to you. And like you just said, you can feel that operational weirdness coming out because people go, that's not how human beings interact. I would always the number one rule is don't be weird. But some of these people can't help it because what you're asking them to do is so unnatural. It's lie with a straight face for a reason that you can't get behind and believe. And it comes off as inauthentic because those people have not sold themselves on it. And then you could see the people who really do believe it, and you just go okay, you're unhinged. That also is really obvious. And so we're looking for that thing that's somewhere between being a social weirdo who's trying to parrot talking points that don't make any sense to them and being someone who is a zealot. And we can see both of those. And somewhere in between is where guys like you and I land, where people go, yeah, they speak really quickly and they're obviously passionate about what they say, but I believe them because they believe them. And they also know what they're talking about most of the time.
No, exactly. But it's one of these things now that is created. It's gone from being a nuisance to the national security state to a high octane, top tier geopolitical threat.
It's a crisis.
Which is to say that yes, because democracy itself is a product of the news in the region of the people voting in that democracy. Democracy promotion has been the means of soft power. So again, just to back up, from time immemorial up until 1948, world empire was done by hard power. There's always soft power projection. That is, there's always media and economic and diplomatic pressure. That was always a part of the international diplomacy game, since the dawn of civilization. But empire itself the hard physical military played a much bigger role from civilization, T0 up until 1948. In 1948, when the rules-based international order was being set up, when its architecture was being laid down at the end of World War II, and the Geneva, when the UN Declaration on Human Rights came out, there was a international prohibition on territorial acquisition by military force. This is one of and this is still in effect to this day.
Say that one more time.
There's a lot of gamesmanship. Yes, there is a international law prohibition on the military acquisition of territory by force. Mm-hmm. This is why, for example, with the Crimea referendum in 2014, for Russia to be able to have the patina of international legitimacy, the people of Crimea had to vote to join the Russian Federation. Because, look, Russia is still in the UN. They still have a spot on the UN Security Council, right? They are part of the international community, pariah as they are right now. In order to be compliant with international law, they had to have the people vote on that referendum. What I'm trying to say is, in 1948, the game changed. You could not acquire territory. You could not, by military force, you had to have the patina of the support of the people for international recognition, which is sort of the base infrastructure for everything else in international diplomacy.
Let me say it simpler for people just one time so they're tracking, because I think a lot of people are probably in the buffering zone as fast as you and I both speak. What we're talking about is that you can't just go in, take your military, like Risk, and conquer a territory and claim this is home, put your flag in and say this is now my place. You can't go take Papua New Guinea that way. You got to go to Papua New Guinea and get them to vote to take you on. Even if you already invaded there, they still have to nominally say, and we accept you as our new leaders. So there has to be that in order to be able to feint the legitimacy, as you're saying, which is what was going on in Crimea. And it's why I guess a lot of people are seeing the problematic nature of the Russians just saying, screw it, we're sick of this nonsense. It's a veil anyway. Let's drop the veil and just move in with our military and take back what we want.
Right. And but even there, remember, like the people in eastern Ukraine actually voted to join the Russian Federation. Mm-hmm. Like even in the Donetsk and Luhansk, they held those referendums the same way they did in Crimea. They still went through the process. Now, the way so what I'm trying to say is the role of the military changed after 1948 from being a primarily, sort of kinetic military hard power territorial acquisition force to being, as you identify with the sort of, civil affairs folks, to being a kind of paramilitary support structure for this massive democracy rigging process in every country on earth, in order to control the politics, because the politics are what you can't just have a military occupation anymore. You do need to have this patina of international recognition, and so I guess what I'm trying to say here is there's this. The role of the media is very important there. Like in the Ukraine, in the run to 2014, USAID and the State Department and the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a CIA cutout, pumped a combined $5 billion into Ukrainian civil society to create the infrastructure for the right sector riots that toppled that government. Okay, we pumped $5 billion worth of media assets, union assets, paramilitary assets, education assets into the region to create a U.S. hub within Ukraine from which to effectively January 6th, the democratically elected president of Ukraine, Yanukovych, out of office in February 2014. We saturate the region with our media assets in order to create a critical component of U.S. national security state pliant population. The issue right now with shit posters on the internet and small authentic voices who grow to be more influential than broadcast media organizations is that they destroy that entire operational planning blueprint that's been around now for over 70 years. Because if there's no amount of money that you can pump into a region to drown out the authenticity of a popular shit poster. And again, this is what happened in the 2016 election. Mm-hmm. Every single broadcast media organization backed Hillary Clinton. There was not a single newspaper endorsement, not a single newspaper endorsement in the entire country, print newspaper, for Donald Trump. And yet he still won because he dominated on social media. And at that point, social media accounts were allowed to grow to huge subscriberships without getting chopped down. Alex Jones in 2016 had more hits combined on his YouTube channel than the entire broadcast news station of CNN. He had like 2 billion views. He was big. One man was bigger than, basically the CIA and DOD's top broadcast media cutouts since the Iraq War.
Yep.
And so, but this illustrates a problem with the operations of the U.S. military, which is that if you can't censor these people, then you can't stop these people, because there's almost no amount of money on earth that can get you to watch a CNN broadcast and be like, you know what? This guy's making a lot of sense. I really trust him. If there's a Kyle Seraphin show, you can tune into instead.
It's true. And then they try and astroturf this stuff too. So they'll go out there and try to, generate these Lujan types. It's like, yeah, that's what I think is real. You look at the production value and what she's doing and the way that she's, cultivated that. And some of that is the way that people do it. But the other thing is you got to have some backing. Knowing what it takes to be able to put something like together is not super easy. It's just so funny that I was just thinking back to when I went forward with the story about the Catholics. The instinct is that the government is doing some sort of work against Christians in general in this country. I think Christians have been sensing it, so they're saying like what it is. And of course, the government pushes back and says, no, of course not. Like, we respect freedom of religion. We believe that there is a First Amendment right, and so on. And then you go out and you go, no, but we actually found this document showing that there's like multiple field offices involved in investigating Catholics because they're trying to pry bar their way into Christians in general. So you do something like that, and then everybody is compelled to pick it up. We put it out on uncoverdc.com, which is Tracy Beans' outfit, which is influential, but it's very, very small. And it made it to everywhere. Everybody had to talk about it because you couldn't get away with it. You can't censor something when it goes viral enough that people are looking around going, oh my God, everything we knew is true. And this is obviously true. And this is coming from people who would know. And, the big piece for me is you don't post it in an emotional way. You just show it. And then, of course, there's the other version, which is that people just ridicule the shit posters you talk about. They're just ridiculing the mainstream, and everybody goes like, yeah, that's how we all feel. It's wild how much they're spending a fortune. You talked about $5 billion in Ukraine. They spend a fortune trying to come after, essentially people that are working out of their house on their free time in between their, real work. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, so again, for your viewers, if you go to my Twitter timeline, at Mike Ben Cyber, what I just put at the top is exactly what you're talking about. So there were documents that were obtained from a DHS plan to produce videos training bystanders to take action political speech by, quote, middle-aged pro-life advocates and old high school friends who are, quote, budding conspiracy theorists. And just going through this to like talk about what you're saying about the targeting of Catholics by the FBI. This is the DHS. Now, DHS has become, the FBI is crooked as it is, and God is it crooked. Mm-hmm. There is the faintest little patina of a chain on it, which is that it still is only supposed to be the intelligence arm of the Justice Department, and technically can't sick its twisted little fangs into you until you have committed an act of suspected law breaking.
That's actually not even true, though, Mike. That's actually
no. You're right. You're right.
It's slightly worse. Yeah, counterintelligence and counterterrorism; those are ideology based. So they can say if you are potentially being targeted by a threat country, then you have an investigation into you. And if you are espousing an ideology that has a history of something that they claim to be violent, they can also open up cases. Right. Those don't have to allege criminal activity.
Totally.
Yeah, we're going to pull up your timeline here in just a second too, so people can see it. Go ahead.
Well, what I'm trying to say is what DHS has moved into is covering this sort of the sort of window around which the FBI has a hard time making this is why DHS, for example, was picked as the censorship center. It was because technically the FBI doesn't have, it's not illegal, and it's hard to come up with a counterintelligence predicate for why the FBI should ban somebody who says, "Hey, actually, masks don't work." Like you can make arguments about things like maybe protests and whatnot, but DHS was particularly the CISA unit was set up as a kind of you don't even, because DHS is not even an arm of the Justice Department. It's a standalone agency, and it can conduct investigations whether they're suspected law breaking or not. And they've really moved into this pure sort of political, cognitive manipulation field, which is why they're partnered with Sander van der Linden, who we talked about earlier, the digital MK Ultra scientist, this internet censorship scientist. But you'll see here in this thread. So, like, if you go to number 3, DHS screen wrote a detailed profile for Anne, a middle-aged pro-life advocate. This is the words of the DHS. She is a, quote, suburban mom surrounded by stock footage of laundry in a minivan who has, quote, become increasingly more concerned about the welfare of other children. So in one scenario, Anne utters the phrase baby killer at a local bakery event to signal her opposition to abortion. DHS gives you, the bystander, 3 choices: calling Anne's husband, contacting Anne's preacher, or stopping by Anne's house to chat to her. And then you role play Anne's hairdresser and what to say when Anne brings up pro-life arguments and begins ranting. And as the hairdresser, DHS, this is like a choose your own adventure story.
Yes.
Gives you the adventure of calling the sheriff on her at the hairdresser's office when she begins ranting about pro-life arguments.
Yeah, God forbid you defend babies. Don't do that.
Yeah, or talking to her coworkers, or sleuthing about what Facebook group she belongs to online. This is the DHS literally creating a fucking Stasi army in their own taxpayer-funded psychological manipulation research groups. And then they go through all these different stock profiles. There's Courtney, an old high school friend who's become a budding conspiracy theorist, who also is a suburban mom with laundry in a minivan. And DHS targets her because she believes, quote, conspiracy theories regarding government connection to child abuse and trafficking. I don't know about you, Kyle, but there's nothing that gives me more faith and confidence that the government is not involved in, quote, child abuse and trafficking than to have a government unit recruiting citizens to stop investigations into a potential government role there.
Look, we're totally, that's the 100% trust me, bro. We're not doing this. It's like, go find out your neighbors that think we're doing this and make them stop being those neighbors. Why don't you turn them into us? We'll straighten them out. That is a totally reputable organization doing things like that. I agree with you. Nothing like, that's the Streisand effect though, unfortunately for them. I mean,
yeah, well, it used to be the case that you could dismiss a conspiracy theory because, if this was really happening, wouldn't the government be like cracking down on you for saying it? Why are you even allowed to say this? If the government is really so bad and they were really doing all these nasty things, don't you think they would be exerting their government power to stop it? It's like that used to be the main argument against these things.
You just made my eyes water,
there's
buddy.
No counter argument.
It's so bad. Yes, the argument being that if why would the government let you talk about it if they were really doing it? It's like, now the government's trying to stop you from talking about it.
Right.
It's so bad. And it's such a lack of self-awareness. I continually say that about people that are in the federal sphere. There's almost no self-awareness. It's like, there's the funny little video, the meme video. It's like, are we the baddies, Is there ever a moment when these guys look around and go, like, look in the mirror and they go, like, I think we're the evil people in this story. We might be the bad guys. I've never seen it.
I ran into this at the State Department. I was at the cyber desk. I was running the cyber desk on the day that Donald Trump was taken off the internet and deplatformed from everything. I mean, this dude was kicked from the information age back to the Stone Age. Okay, they didn't just kill his Twitter. They killed his YouTube, his Facebook. They killed his MailChimp. They killed his merch store. The guy couldn't even sell a fucking Trump mug, and he was the president of the United States. I'm so sorry for my language, but and meanwhile, everybody else in the State Department is doing, jumping jack high fives, and I'm like staring out into the office like, you morons, you effing morons. Have you any idea what you've done to this country's diplomatic posture? Every argument we have made for 2.5 centuries about media freedom and about the importance of a free and open media environment is going to be, it takes 2.5 centuries to build that reputation. It takes 2.5 minutes to destroy it. And lo and behold, that friggin' day, I get inbound from EU counterparts about how they're terrified that the U.S. These are people who hated Trump, by the way. Okay, these are people adjacent to the EU high commissioners and Angela Merkel in Germany. These are folks who are not friends of Donald Trump, but they all saw that and said, "Whoa, that's terrifying." And that's one more reason we need to engage in what was called digital strategic autonomy, so that Europe is no longer as dependent on U.S. internet architecture and U.S. internet giants. Because if they can do that to their own president, they can do it to us even more easily. So and my lieutenants were like, it was so crazy because like they were shocked when Angela Merkel came out and made that statement. When the EU High Commissioner folks came out and made that statement, they were shocked. They were like, "Wait, but I thought they would be supportive."
They're like, "How dare they? We just nailed it. We're high-fiving."
Yeah, you can't like unscrew that Pandora's box. Like now, for time immemorial, China gets to put in its Democracy Summit white papers, which it literally did the year after this happened, that China is actually more of a true democracy than the United States, because the Chinese government has never banned its own president from being able to speak. I mean, they literally referenced the deplatforming of the president. China was no friend of Trump, okay? But this is something that is totally devastating to our diplomatic posture. And look, there's no illusions about this, right? I mean, diplomacy is about carrots and sticks more than it is about principles. Mm-hmm. But these things do matter. We ran into this all the time where when we were trying to pry IT infrastructure off of China's Huawei and trying to make arguments around how the Chinese national security state has a backdoor through Huawei if you adopt Chinese infrastructure. Well, the argument we would constantly get back in our face from counterparts was Snowden. You do it too.
That's Snowden. Right. Yeah, you're doing the same thing. I'm going to read you something this is from August 4th. Secretary Anthony Blinken wrote the following, quote, "The United States strongly condemns Russia's conviction of opposition leader Alexei, how do you say his last name? Navalny? Okay, on politically motivated charges. The Kremlin cannot silence the truth. Navalny should be released. My response to this, quote tweet, quote, "The Russian Federation strongly condemns the United States indictment of opposition leader Donald Trump on politically motivated charges. The Justice Department cannot silence the truth. Trump's indictment should be dismissed." And then I followed up with, "The United States I grew up in would invade the United States I live in." At least then we had the principles when I was a kid in the 80s. They would have invaded us. Operation Urgent Fury, Operation Just Cause were all examples of where like, you're a banana republic and we may be corporately motivated, but you don't even have the patina of legitimacy. We're coming in. And we would do stuff like that. And, people can argue that we were doing influence. We were doing the empire building in our hemisphere. And I'm sure that's correct. But at least we thought we were the good guys. And at least the American people bought that. We're not even selling that we're the good guys at this point. And we're just blatantly doing this stuff. And I think you just nailed it on the head. It's like they were high-fiving the censorship of our sitting president in an agency ostensibly that reports to the president. What's less legitimate than that?
Nailed it. And you nailed it. I mean, not only would they, would the United States we used to live in invade the current United States we live. That's an amazing line, by the way.
Thank you. You can take it. You can take it. Just credit me.
Before they did the land invasion, they would sanction us into bankruptcy.
That's right. Oh, for sure. Yeah. First, we would be starving, and we would be reading old USA pamphlets as they got bombed over here by B-2 or B-52s that would fly over and drop leaflet pallets. We'd all be reading about how the old USA was better, and then it would invade us, for sure. And we would have no money, and our gas stations would be empty. They would cut us off. We'd be driving like cars from 13 years ago because we wouldn't have cars for a few years. Then they would invade us, for sure.
Right. And again, there's like sort of two things I sort of want to build on what you just said.
Sure.
Which is one, for folks who don't know, Navalny is a CIA backed Russian politician who the U.S. State Department, I think, has declared like the true and rightful president of the country,
Might as well.
Despite the fact that he got less than 2% of the vote.
He's basically the Stacey Abrams of Russia.
No, he was literally groomed in the Yale University Jackson School, which is a CIA asset emerging leaders program. And so he was incubated. This is a Russian politician who they tried to get to orchestrate a right-wing nationalist youth revolution movement because all their liberal reforms all their color revolution left-wing attempts in Russia failed miserably. If you remember back in 2011, 2012, the U.S. State Department tried to basically interfere in the 2011-2012 Russian election by shipping in all of these, sort of Pussy Riot. If you remember Pussy Riot, this was this National Endowment for Democracy funded.
It was a punk rock move.
Feminist rock band. Yeah. Feminist, gross, deviant sexual rock band who was deployed by the U.S. Embassy there in order to create this transgender, sexually deviant, youth movement to rise up against Vladimir Putin on the basis of his racist, sexist, patriarchal, right-wing viewpoint.
Right.
That failed miserably. And so they
drove Russians right into the arms of a Putin, by the way. It's like it did the exact opposite for a failure to read the tea leaves of what Russians are about, but that's okay.
Right, so they switched tack just like they always do. It's the same way that we support the Azov battalion, Nazis in Ukraine. Just as even though right next door in Turkey, we support the Kurdish Antifa units. All that matters is this asset effective at toppling a government and putting a U.S.-backed dictator in place. And so Navalny was groomed as a sort of right-wing, 2.0 attempt. And the opposite they've done on Navalny are the most hilarious things in the world. First of all, the U.S. government-backed documentary called Navalny just won Best Documentary at the Oscars this year.
It was objectively the best documentary.
Hollywood's oh yeah, dude, the thing is the sludge fest. Someone should do like an honest trailers about it. But they ran this up, by the way, to sanction Russia a couple of years ago, using Bellingcat, a National Endowment for Democracy, CIA cutout.
I like it when people quote Bellingcat stuff. They're like, Bellingcat said this. It's like, really? You always take your force feeding from the CIA? Is that what you do?
Yeah, its top funder is the CIA. Okay, its top funder is the National Endowment for Democracy, which was literally created in 1983 as a non-CIA CIA cutout because at the time, coming out of the Church Committee hearings, there wasn't the political capital to do CIA dirty work directly, and so Reagan created it as this civil society based conduit. In fact, the founders, I have a whole thread. If you look at my Twitter for just the phrase National Endowment for Democracy, you'll see all this. But Navalny, they did this op with Navalny that's really funny. That's just great because it really gets to this whole psyops and geopolitics fusion. So one of the ways that they were trying to kill the Nord Stream pipeline before they just blew it up was through crippling sanctions. And they needed predicates to do so that accused the Russians of, basically atrocities and human rights violations. So one of the ways they did this is they accused the Russians of poisoning Navalny on a flight that he was on several years ago. And
this was the
and
glove
Navalny
hand
said,
poison transmission, wasn't it? It was like a gloved hand that supposedly touched him in the face.
Worse.
Okay,
it's worse. It's worse. I call it. So understand. So Novichok is said to be the most deadly Russian nerve agent, ever created. It kills you instantly. So the official story, I shit you not, the official story is that Russian KGB agents broke into Alexander Navalny's hotel room the night before his flight. They picked out the pair of underwear that he was going to wear on the flight. They smeared Novichok on the underwear. And then when Novichok put the underwear, when Navalny put the Novichok on as underwear for the flight, he then fell terribly ill and was flown to basically a CIA hospital in East Germany, conveniently, as the plane was rerouted. Of course, that was the head of CIA operations in Europe for the Cold War. But so the official story is Navalny's Novichok nutsack is the reason that Russia ended up getting sanctioned. They literally put Russian nerve. Now, of course, it didn't kill him, just like it didn't kill the Skripals.
Well, it's the deadliest. It's the deadliest nerve agent possible, unless you get a transdermal scrotal exposure. And if you get the transdermal taint and scrotum exposure, you actually can survive it. It's a little known fact that they actually picked up. If they had just done it with his T-shirt, he'd be done.
Right. Right.
But you can't die from the transdermal exposure to your ball sack. That's just the key.
Right, even though you're baking in it in hours.
Right, just marinating. Your grundle marination there is extreme.
Right, so get this. We only know the official story because Bellingcat, again, whose top funder is the CIA.
Right.
The CIA's most notorious cutout, did a prank call to a Russian KGB agent. You can literally look this up on YouTube. The Bellingcat prank call where they pretended to be another KGB agent, and they get this KGB agent on the phone call to admit to this Novichok nutsack plan on the phone with Navalny speaking in a fake KGB accent to tease this information out of him.
Oh, that's the best false flag that's ever been done. They were able to get him on record.
Right. And it's like
everybody falls for the false flag.
So
you're a KGB officer too? Let me tell you stories about things that I did with the KGB. I've never met you. I'm not going to validate anything. It's so bad. Think how cagey you and I are on Twitter. Think about how cagey you and I are on Twitter if someone reached out and sends us a message like, hey, I work for the government. I got this thing to tell you. Hard pass, bro. You think that the KGB guy was just like, oh, yeah, for sure. Like, you're in the KGB? Well, we're all bros then. Let's just talk shop. Let's talk about the nutsack poisoning.
Dude, and it's so scripted. It's hilarious. Like, even at the start of the dialogue, the guy's like, well, this is a little strange. You're not calling me on a secured line. And Navalny's like, no, it's cool. It's cool. Let's just talk.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, okay, let's continue on with this.
Yeah, let me confess the sanctions predicate for this. And so and of course that's like it's reported completely uncritically.
Right.
Every single Mockingbird Media asset amplifies it, and it wins best documentary of the year at the Oscars.
Which let's just use that to talk about Rob Reiner, which I thought was a really fun thing. You were talking about being able to sense it coming out of these guys' skin. Talk Rob Reiner. Talk about the meathead connection.
Yeah. So, first on the side, so Rob Reiner is this, sort of big Hollywood producer. And,
literally big.
Yes, literally big. But, so I never really paid much attention to it. But, he was sort of trending because he made this, this outrageous statement on Twitter that in order to, the only way to defend democracy is, if Trump dies in prison and there's no third party candidates. I mean, it's basically like when the CIA goes and rigs an election in say Ukraine, this is the blueprint. You lock up the opposition political candidates and you ban opposition political parties. I mean, Rob Reiner was just calling for exactly what we've now done in a dozen countries through the State Department and CIA over the past several years.
Right.
And, I was looking at this tweet and everyone's talking about it, from sort of the angle of, these Hollywood liberals, they're so out of touch. They're so tone deaf. They're so hyperbolic. They're such silly gooses. And I'm looking at this. I'm like, this doesn't look right. There's a speak. There's a CIA speak that, when you sort of are in this long enough, you identify, which is, I think if you just give me some space to explain this.
Do it.
There's such a thing as mania. Like the bipolar personality, they have their highs and their lows. They have their sort of delusions of grandeur, and they have their moments of sort of, laconic, low energy, sort of depression. When people are in a mania, they tend to focus for the most part on things with high primal proximity, money, sex, squad goals, what the crew is doing, things that have high dopaminergic rewards. That's what normal people who are on drugs, or normal people who are bipolar, normal people who have what I call the cocaine energy display. There is a sort of addiction, a kind of lexicon for State Department pablum. There's a State Department speak, which involves all these sort of highfalutin jargon terms around democracy and its substructures. When people are on cocaine, or when people are having a manic
Hold on, I just gotta take a breath. We gotta take a breath. There's a specific language that people use when they are in government and they are pushing a government agenda about it, and then you also pivoted directly to cocaine. Just keep going. I just wanted to pause, let people digest that.
Yeah, well, look, when people are in the throes of a manic episode or are on a hard stimulant drug like that, it is extremely unnatural to spend that high reciting basic democracy esoterica with the downer pablum of a State Department press release. That's so I can't begin to describe how unnatural that is. Imagine Jimi Hendrix, at the peak of a sort of heroin-induced flow state as he's riffing on guitar and he's
full euphoria,
sort of coming up, but his lyrics and then he stops the solo and just does this
he starts telling you about life insurance and about how you really need to hedge some of the dangers in the world with a little bit of money invested in a possible insurance policy.
Normal people don't do that.
Right. Normal people don't pivot from people. They don't mix fun and whatever horrible crap the government wants you to mouth. Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I'm tracking. I just think the way people are spitting out their coffee watching the live chat here, listening, going this is so. This is the analytics that you have to do when you look at this stuff. It's what the hell's happening here? Manic energy plus government talking points equals meathead, CIA cutout.
Well, that's the thing is even normal hardcore left wing progressive zealots don't do that. Mm-hmm. They will sometimes talk those talking points, but usually not quite so concisely, and they won't do it reads different. So again, this is not even a right wing left wing thing. This is just a CIA thing, or a State Department attaché thing. And so I looked at this and I was like, that don't look right. And so it was within 3 seconds. I started looking into Rob Reiner's background. So first of all, I just trolled him a little bit. I just put in his reply without knowing anything in advance other than that he was a Hollywood producer. I just put, "What is your relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency?"
Right.
And then to because I was looking for a receipt at that point to reply to myself in the comments. I was like, "Yeah, what is this relationship?" And within 3 seconds, I find that this dude literally headed up a CIA all-star squad. Now technically it's called Committee to Investigate Russia, but in the center of the infographic is Donald Trump and Paul Manafort. Putin's way out to the side. Now in this committee, he is the founder, director, and organizer of this committee, who on his board of advisors is made up of. There's 8 people on the board of advisors, 8 to 10. 4 of them are number one heads, chiefs of the Central Intelligence Agency, who are his personal advisors as head of the organization. John Brennan, Michael Morrell, Leon Panetta, and I forget who the fourth is. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, no sweat. But what we can say is that is totally organic. Everybody probably has a couple of CIA, directors whispering in their ear if they have a certain profile, right?
I mean, Michael B. Hayden.
There it is.
Michael B. Hayden.
Yeah, General Hayden.
So and Michael B. Hayden again was not just the head of the CIA. He was also the head of the NSA, and a 4-star general. And before that, he was in the U.S. Air Force Intelligence Corps. The exact thing that we just talked about as the lead into this segment.
This is when the audience shrugs and goes, "Yeah, no big deal. That's fine. That's all fine here."
And Leon Panetta was the head. Yeah, Leon Panetta was the number one head of the CIA, the number one head of the Defense Department, and he was the White House chief of staff for Obama. The chief of staff, by the way, is the gatekeeper, who is often more powerful than the president himself. So, and then the other people on this board are Jed Johnson, Obama's DHS secretary, who basically created the CIA's censorship architecture with the predicate to CISA. Clint Watts, the former U.S. Army counterinsurgency and FBI special agent, basically everybody on his advisory board, everybody in his ear, has a high level above top secret national security clearance with literally 4 number one CIA directors. So I made the joke that, imagine that, you get invited to Rob Reiner's Malibu pool party thinking that you made it in Hollywood, and you find yourself the only dude in the hot tub without a top secret national security clearance.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
What is Rob Reiner, a little old Hollywood producer, doing with 4 CIA directors as his personal advisors? What skill set does Rob Reiner bring to the investigation that 4 CIA directors are taking times out their day to help Rob Reiner, the Hollywood producer, accomplish?
Everybody needs a mental midget, and preferably overweight, that can be an empty vessel. He's a big empty vessel. He's got lots of room to fill things up, and they fill him up, and then they just squeeze him, and he spits out, manic CIA talking points. It's fantastic. What's more fun than having like a vacuous former actor and a producer and someone that basically just reads lines that somebody else writes for a living with legitimately bizarre passion. It's so good. It's so good you couldn't script this, it turns out. But it's also really funny and sad to watch.
Well,
because they're trying to pull it over.
Is the script of his own movie. And what it is every intelligence service needs a media conduit.
Yes, that's it. They all need somebody to get it out there. They need to launder the information somehow. Mike, before we make everybody go and either start packing food up in their cave and stacking ammunition and magazines, you got any hope for anybody here from what you're seeing here? You got any course of actions that people can engage in? I'm okay with the answer is no, but if there is any, let's share it.
Well, the number one thing you can do is talk about this stuff. Tell your friends, tell your family. Tell people who you can trust and nudge, if you will, because it's hard to overstate the power of simply talking about things. Sometimes there's no clear set of actions that even sort of present themselves as opportunities that you can really predict in advance until it's on the tip of everyone's tongue because everyone's talking about it, and then suddenly a million different things break open. Now, what I will say is that Trump is doing far better in the polls right now than he was doing in 2020. At the same time, the regime has ramped up tactics like, it may be the prosecutors who determine this election rather than the polls. And if that's the case, this country, everything we've ever known about this country is going to fly out the window. I mean, it's not even clear that there's going to be an election. At this point, I think the trial date is trying to be set for this Fannie Willis thing for October 23rd, which is like 10 days before the 2024 election. They're going to have a trial where he's facing 1,000 years. But look, this is not the first time that somebody has gone to prison and then rose back to power. I mean, we literally just saw this in Israel with Netanyahu having being indicted on criminal corruption charges, and then a year and a half later, he's president again. This is, you can make the argument that, without getting into the specifics or weighing into it too deeply, but you can make the argument that this happened to Gandhi and to Mandela. There's a lot of, of highly persecuted martyr movements that just need to keep the faith and stand the test of time, because it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But the more it's on the tip of everyone's tongues, the better positioned you are for a lucky break. And basically that's what we need now.
I'll tell you something that's kind of interesting to me. I haven't heard anybody float this out, but you mentioned the chief of staff being somebody that's almost, the chief of staff tends to be like kind of a policy nerd, like a wonk that really knows, like nuts and bolts guy, gets things done, guy or girl, I guess could be, doesn't make a difference, but not somebody that needs to be the public face of the franchise. And then you've got the chief executive is the person that everybody has to love and get behind. But a lot of the great ideas come from behind. It'd be really interesting because I feel like Ron DeSantis, and I know he's much maligned for running for president. I think he's kind of out of his depth in a lot of it for personality-wise. But when it comes to policy stuff, he seems pretty good. It'd be interesting to see an alignment there, bringing him on as a potential chief of staff type guy that keeps the guardrails up, and then you let just the wild bull that is Trump just upset people. I kind of don't care either way on any of this stuff. It just it doesn't get me emotionally. I just want to see an election. Like any election would be good that's not heavily weighed in on it. It seems like you have the same instincts I do, that it's not even guaranteed at this point. We're literally walking down the playbook of places where they lock up the opposition, they outlaw the other parties, and then they just say, this is your choice. Vote for the one guy that we say you can vote for. And man, scary to hear other people that you and I haven't compared notes on that, but we're all hearing the same thing and feeling the same thing, I think.
Well, we gave over $100 billion to Ukraine this year because they're, quote, model democracy, and Ukraine banned elections. If we're sort of, following the blueprint, I mean, literally Ukraine has banned not just opposition political parties, not just opposition media, not just opposition religions. They've now banned the entire election process itself. And this is what we are being clockworked oranged as the model state of democracy for the U.S. to follow. In fact, Samantha Power, the USAID head, recently complained that Ukrainians are much more avant-garde about digital surveillance state technologies, like something called their DIA app, and that U.S. citizens are not yet ready for, but should be. So, look, I mean, everything's on the table. Mm-hmm. We're in for a wild ride. What I would say is, keep your chin up, put your family first, but always hold this in your heart, and where you can, try to maintain a little bit of a sense of humor about these things, because we're witnessing history, and if we live to tell the tale, it's going to be a hell of a fucking story.
Oh, so true. I was just thinking about how we were giving money to Ukraine to do what they're doing so they could give it back to Sam Bankman-Fried. And if he hadn't gotten caught, they would have been able to keep laundering our money back into the Democrat political process. Amazing stuff. What a great time to be alive. Interesting times for sure. Mike, I told somebody in the chat, and I think it's true, if I could just get you and me in a bunker somewhere and we could just do guerrilla broadcasts, one, we would have a ton of fun doing it because you're one of my favorite guys to talk to. You're so sharp and quick-witted. And like you said, even though we are looking at some of the darkest topics, you have the same sense of humor that I kind of enjoy. So thanks for being with me this morning. Thanks for dialing in. I'm glad we were able to fix our tech stuff. Thanks for hanging out. And I know you're going to be on Larry O'Connor. What time are you on Larry's show?
12:10.
12:10. All
so,
right.
A little less than an hour. But yeah, no, thanks a lot, man. Let's run it back soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. We'll do it again. Folks, you can follow Mike at the foundationforfreedomonline.com. That's spelled out all the way, foundationforfreedomonline.com. All those words in one place. Or you could just follow him on Twitter and you can link through all of his stuff. His Twitter account is Mike, M-I-K-E, Benz, like Mercedes-Benz, B-E-N-Z, Cyber, the word cyber. Mike Benz Cyber, at Mike Benz Cyber. Mike, you are the man. I will talk to you very soon. And I want to say thanks to all our guests who stuck around with us. We are streaming here live from Liberty Hill, Texas. Sometimes a little challenge on the live show starts at 9:30 Eastern time, 8:30 here in Texas, America. And you guys are the best. You really are. You've been a great chat group. I've been able to kind of follow along as you receive some of the stuff that we're talking about. We topped a bunch of topics today. I think they're all going to be useful. Share that information with your friends and family in ways they can digest. Show them the movie Mirage Men. It's on, I think it's on Netflix. It's generally free. It'll show you that government sort of psyops, the information war has been going on a long time in various different ways, and your distrust of the government should be high. I talked about it yesterday in a Twitter space. When you have people who work for the government that distrust the government, those are the right people. When you've got people that are working for people like Mike Benz and they are high-fiving for deplatforming the sitting president, we have a serious problem. And ladies and gentlemen, we have that serious problem. It is legit and it is real. It is out there. Thanks to all of you for watching. Thanks to those who have been leaving our 5-star review. Let's go ahead and read one today from Old Goat Woman. What a great title that is. Old Goat Woman, entitled one of Kyle's best episodes, or best interviews rather, episode 129, Inside the Gulag. 5 stars. Difficult to hear, but everyone should listen. How low our justice has become so biased. There it is. These are good men that the DOJ has chosen to make criminals. Your sense of humor that appears at times crack me up. The time you zoned out with Tracy Beans was hilarious. That's true. I did talk to Tracy and I was doing something else. Sometimes when women talk to me and I'm just hearing the same thing, I just tune out. That's a major character flaw for me. Last little bit, she ends with, thank you for providing a podcast they never miss. Old Goat Woman, you're the best. Thanks for sharing all that stuff. Thanks for calling me out. I actually just subscribed to Tracy Beans on Twitter, so I'm following her there, and I'm also paying her subscription to be part of her spaces. Tracy has been a 100% backer of the Suspendables. We are really grateful to her, and one of the places we've been able to send information to you all. So by all means, we love Tracy, and we love all of you. We love that you are listening to us. If you're listening to this on Apple, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, please share it to your friends. We do stream this thing even on other platforms that we are not big on because we want to be able to reach the audience where they are, not where we want them. But if you can, come to rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. If you add a /live in front of it, you'll get the newest episode or whatever we're doing live. So come join us on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. We look forward to seeing you there. Thanks to Ryan Matta. Last one, Ryan Matta Media, M-A-T-T-A, Ryan Matta Media, producing our stream on these weekday mornings, and follow him on Twitter right there. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you again tomorrow for a Friendly Friday, and I think it'll be an outstanding week. We've had a bunch of interviews. Thanks so much for being with us. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.